Welcome to our World Cup 2018 final preview. It's a showdown between France and Croatia, and there's plenty of reasons to get excited for this one. Jim, France are the favourites for this one, aren't they?
They are, yeah. France are going to be the red-hot favourites, I think, after Croatia got past England in their quarter-final. So I think that would have been a more even game. I think Croatia, with their extra time behind them, playing second as well, then I think France will be the favourites for this one.
Yeah, Croatia having had Denmark in the last 16, went to extra time, went to penalties, Croatia won. Russia 2-2, went to penalties again and they won. And then against England in the semi-final, they just edged them in extra time, didn't they? They did look the better team. It's not like Croatia stumbled their way through here.
No, I don't think any England fan can be too disappointed at being knocked out by a team that were inferior. I think for the first half an hour, England started well, and Croatia just took a bit of time to get into their stride, changed things around a little bit at half time. Seemed to nullify that long diagonal ball into Raheem Sterling, push the fullbacks up a bit, and they got a lot of joy in the final third from then on. And obviously Croatia's strength is their midfield, so if you're able to put more kind of onus on the possession part of the game and make England play over the top, then they were always going to struggle. But we just couldn't get it. And then clinical edge, you know, they did miss some quite presentable chances, to be honest, but the way that Mandzukic spun in behind John Stones and took his chance to win the game, you know, it's a sign of a top-class striker, which we know that he is.
Yeah, and France look a lot more comfortable heading into this one in terms of the matches they've won. They didn't necessarily blow anyone out of the water in the group stage, but often what we see when teams do get to the World Cup final is it's the ones that grow throughout the tournament that tend to be the ones the teams that people remember, the teams that do win the final. And France have a really, really strong squad heading into this. They have the likes of Lloris, Varane, Umtiti, Kante's had a brilliant tournament, and Griezmann and Mbappe obviously up front. And it's definitely a step up for Croatia now, having had a relatively comfortable route to the final. France are a really big gun, aren't they?
Yeah, and France have disposed with quite a lot of big names internationally as well. Argentina, I know they were a bit of a mess at the World Cup, but they knocked those out in the last 16. They beat Uruguay, who were kind of tipped to be the dark horses of the tournament. Actually, they were Croatia on the other side that have gone pretty far from a quite big price to begin with. And then obviously got the better of Belgium, who were a lot of people's pick going into the last four to surprise. So I think they've earned their stripes at the World Cup, despite perhaps not being as impressive as some of the other teams that we've seen on a one-off game basis. I mean, the win over Argentina was pretty spectacular.
It was.
As a contest, obviously, probably game of the tournament. Maybe the 3-3 Portugal-Spain in the group stage.
Probably edge it for France, Argentina.
Yeah, because it had more on it. Right? Yeah, it had more on it. And that was Mbappe's breakthrough game.
It was,
I think that's still the kind of standout performance was his. Against Argentina with the 2 goals and earning the penalty. So it will be interesting to see whether Deschamps kind of takes the handbrake off a little bit, because I always feel like France do play with the handbrake on a little bit under Deschamps. I think they did in the Euros. I think it ended up costing them against Portugal in the final, but it will be interesting to see whether he lets loose a little bit here or whether he sticks to type and just tries to grind it out, because ultimately they're going to be much fresher. They had a day more to recover from their semi-final. They've not been to extra time yet. They're a young squad as well, and hopefully they've got enough in their legs from a France point of view to go all the way.
I think even with the handbrake on, I can't really see past them. I mean, Croatia have a really top team, don't get me wrong. This is their golden generation, the likes of Modric, Rakitic, Subasic. It's probably all of their last major tournament, at least definitely their last World Cup. But for me, I look at that France team and the quality they've got throughout it in defence, midfield and attack. It's just going to be hard for Croatia, who have been through an extra game essentially, because you add up all those different extra
minutes,
times. 90 minutes. They played an extra match to France. And considering the fact how good France are, I think it's going to be difficult. But of course, there is the sort of shadow of the Euros for France, who went into the Euro 2016 final as favourites.
And a lot of that France team were in that. The team hasn't changed a huge amount from 2 years ago. So whether or not that will have a psychological edge to hand Croatia a psychological advantage. I mean, you can't get much more belief in a side than going through 2 lots of extra time and penalties and then an extra time win against England. I mean, Croatia must feel like they're invincible at the moment.
They'll feel like it's destiny, won't they?
Yeah, whether or not they can back that up on the pitch is a different matter, but the way that they seem to be growing into games makes me think this isn't quite as open and shut as a lot of people would make out, because even if they start a little bit slowly, even if France go 1-0 up, it looks like Croatia are more than happy to grow into a game and finish stronger, and ultimately that's where it's going to be won and lost rather than the first 20 minutes of the game.
Yeah. That's fair. That's a fair point. I think that for me, a lot of the battle will come down to midfield, and you said Croatia's midfield,
and that's where I think the one area where Croatia do have an advantage over France is that midfield as a unit. I think there are individual players you can argue about, but if you look at the way that they set up, particularly with that midfield three against England, Kante is brilliant, and Pogba is a million times better for France than he is for Manchester United because of the freedom that Kante gives him to go forward and do what he thrived at doing at Juventus. Like that's where we've seen the best of Paul Pogba. But whether or not that midfield three with the full-backs getting forward will be able to give Croatia enough chances to get the better of France I think it's still a legitimate question. I don't think it's quite as kind of straightforward because that's where Croatia's main strength is, and the way Modric is playing, Perisic, was fantastic against England. If Rakitic turns up as well, which we've not really seen all three of them have a great game together, if they can get that triumvirate kind of together, then Croatia have got a chance.
It's incredible for Croatia to get to this final, isn't it? I mean, they've never reached a major tournament final before. They're a nation of just 4 million.
I think it's 4.5 million people.
And a young nation as well, having split off from Yugoslavia in the mid-90s. The best they've ever done so far until this point was in 1998 when they got to the semi-finals, which is their first World Cup. Incredible achievement for them. But 20 years later, it looks like they might finally come good on a lot of that potential.
As you said, it's the golden generation, isn't it? A lot of these players won't be at Qatar in 2022. The Euros is a different story, I guess, 2 years on. They could be, but they'll never have a better chance. And we were saying this about England going into the semi-final as well. Croatia are very much in that position where they've not had to beat a real top-tier nation yet to get here. Even throughout the group, I don't think Argentina were that good.
No.
Particularly, once they went 1-0 down, they just went all-out attack, and Croatia were able to pick them off with a couple of late goals. So they, as you said, they might well feel that it's destiny, and that's a strong kind of psychological factor for teams that feel invincible almost.
We saw that
to the pitch.
We saw that 2 years ago with Portugal as well. It was very much like Ronaldo believed it was his destiny to win.
And even when he came off, they were able to get past a France team that were almost superior to Portugal in every kind of sense. Take Ronaldo out of that Portugal team. I don't think there's many of those players that you'd line up against France and say, well, they're better than their opposite numbers. No. So it could well be a case that team belief gets them through. I don't know, again, we haven't seen France tested enough yet almost to know.
It feels weird that saying that though, doesn't it? Because they have played against really good teams.
Yeah.
I think, and that's kind of credit to France, for me anyway.
That's probably what it is. They look like they haven't been, they've made it look like they haven't been tested, when actually the teams that they've beaten were some of the kind of front runners for the actual competition as a whole.
Like the neutralisation of Uruguay for me was very impressive. I know they didn't have Cavani, but still managing to keep quiet Suarez and managing not to let that midfield overrun them. And Uruguay have a quality young midfield. And also against Argentina, I mean, they do at the end of the day still have Messi, and they still managed to see out that game. Bonkers game, don't get me wrong. But yeah, it's definitely one that I think Deschamps, I'm not necessarily his biggest fan, but I think some credit does definitely go to the fact that he's getting the most out of this team so far, at least. It's hard to be too critical of his tactics.
He's got them to two major finals in two tournaments. You can't really say fairer than that.
If they lose, then all of a sudden the criticism does turn on them, and it's like, are you mentally secure enough to get through these finals?
Bottling two big chances where you're big favourites.
Yeah, and for Griezmann as well, you'd have to look at this sort of first half of his career, I guess, and say there's a lot of lost finals in there with Atletico as well. And questions will be asked, but at this point it's still very much open. The Golden Boot, however, looks very much shut.
Yeah, it looks an open and shut case with Harry Kane's 2 goals ahead of Romelu Lukaku. Obviously, they'll face off in the third place playoff a day before the final, but with plenty of rotation expected. I'm not sure, whether both of those will play. If they don't, it's highly unlikely anyone's going to overhaul Kane's total. Even those players that are in the final, it's not really been a competitive heat since the group stages because of how far ahead Kane was by that point. It looks an open and shut case for Harry Kane. The only side point to that is if Gareth Southgate chooses to rotate and start like Jamie Vardy up front and rest Kane, who did look really, really tired at the end of the Croatia game, compared to Lukaku, who is probably motivated to go out and try and catch Kane. So if he was to maybe score a hat-trick, or obviously 2 for a split on 6 total, which you wouldn't put past Romelu Lukaku, who has shown up in the games that against the smaller nations so far, but we're yet to see him show up and put in a real big goal-scoring performance. He's put in a couple of really good performances, and I think there's lots of movement and kind of the step over kind of non-touch assist for the winner against Japan. But he has missed some glaring opportunities, so maybe he feels he's got a point to prove, and against a potentially second-string England team, he could make hay. So I think he's the only player, obviously, that's really in with a chance of catching Kane.
A very, very outside shot would be Mbappe, who has 3 goals already. He could get a hat-trick in the final and level up. But I think it's certainly fair to say he's a major contender for the Golden Ball.
Absolutely,
the best player of the
I think at the moment it looks like a straight fight between Mbappe and Modric as the kind of poster boys for their respective sides campaigns so far. I think all the attention pre-match or pre-tournament certainly was on Antoine Griezmann for France, but Mbappe's kind of stepped out of that shadow, and obviously it's his breakthrough international tournament. Anyone who watches top level football in Europe will know what Mbappe can do. It's not a surprise to see him do that. It's not a complete breakout. He's not an unknown, but he's not had the opportunity. He's not been in the France team long enough to
he wasn't
to
show
Euros. No, he wasn't.
It's crazy to think.
I think he's still only just made it to double figures in caps for France. So this is a fantastic opportunity for him to show, and he showed no fear against Argentina. Still the performance of the tournament for me, and obviously the way that the Golden Ball works is that a FIFA set of delegates will put together a shortlist and then it's voted on by the respective media. So there is an element of, I think there's a kind of recency bias there. If there's a big performance in the final from either one of those players, it could tilt it in their favour. Or we could see someone come from like an outside shot, someone who's done okay so far, and that's why Griezmann kind of can't be ruled out, because if he does put in a match-winning performance for France in the final, he scored a couple of goals already, that might be enough to tilt it in his favour if the two leading contenders don't kind of show their very, very best.
Yeah, I do think you're right. I do think it is pretty much a shootout at this point between Mbappe and Modric. But there are some outside contenders that could maybe force the way.
For sure, and I think there's a lot more France players that could win it than Croatians as well. Modric seems to be the only one really in with a shot, whereas if you go a bit further back in the contenders list, you're looking at the likes of Paul Pogba and N'Golo Kante, he's had a fantastic tournament. The problem with Kante is that he doesn't do the things that will be recognised on score sheets. He does a lot of the breaking up of play, and this is what we've been saying about him since he broke through at Leicester, to be honest. Helped them to win the league, then went to Chelsea and did exactly the same thing, and now he's doing it for France, potentially in a World Cup final.
For me, he deserves it more than Modric. And if Croatia win, if they do win, then there's definitely a very compelling argument to say give that award to Modric. But at this point, I would definitely give it to Kante.
Yeah, and you don't have to win. His history will show us that you don't have to win the tournament to be given the Golden Ball either. Diego Forlan won it, and he wasn't even in the final a couple of tournaments ago. Messi won it for Argentina 4 years ago, obviously beaten finalists. Oliver Kahn won it for Germany 2002, obviously beaten finalists there. So
did Zidane win it?
Zidane won it. So actually, winning the final
seems to count against you.
Yeah, winning the final seems to count against you. So perhaps it will be someone from the beaten side, and that allows you to shine. But at the moment, the performances seem to suggest it's between Modric and Mbappe.
Who do you reckon is going to win then? If you were going to call a score at this point, France, Croatia, I think on the spot.
France will win narrowly by 1 goal. I'd say kind of maybe a 2-1 prediction.
I was going to say 2-1, so let's go for that.
So if Mbappe gets a goal and then everyone's happy for Golden Ball and for France to win outright. I think Croatia have a good chance, and I think they've got a better chance than some people have given them credit for, because I think that's what they've thrived on, being overlooked by some degree. They certainly were against England, and I think they thrive as underdogs. So there's every chance that they could go. I think it's going to be a lot tighter than what a lot of people are expecting. I think people are putting almost too much on the fatigue angle. I think it's the adrenaline of a World Cup final. If you can't get motivated for 90 minutes against France in a World Cup final, then you've got probably not going to make it as a professional footballer, which all these guys have. So I think it's going to be tight, close, but I'd have to side with France if I had to pick.
I think I'm the same. Let us know in the comments section who you think is going to win the World Cup 2018 final, and stay across goal for all the latest World Cup final coverage.